Well, good afternoon, people. I guess it's good evening. Um, Man, I got so much on my heart, so many feelings and emotions, around a lot of this stuff that we're going through now, what we've been going through. Um, I don't even know where to start, man. I really appreciate, though, this social media platform because it gives you the opportunity just to speak just what's on your heart. So that, this is not a conversation that's about, it's not programmed, it's not planned. It's just something on your heart, on my heart. You know what I mean? That I want to share. In whatever way I can. Um, some people say it's about giving your 2 cents. It's past that. It's past giving my 2 cents. It's just how do we move forward, man? What do we do individually to contribute to? And I hope y'all can hear me because that's just water in the back, and I don't know if it's loud enough, but hopefully you can hear me. But what is it that we can do individually that just will cause some type of ripple in this ocean? One thing I believe that everything is a seed. Everything that we produce, everything that we do is a seed. So even if it feels like it's an overwhelming task and your voice is muffled in the midst of millions and millions of voices at this moment, because the fact remains that everything is a seed, then that still gives me hope that whatever I'm planting in this moment, man, will be used and will contribute to our elevation, to our moving forward, in this moment in time. You know what I mean? And I'm specifically talking to the spiritual people of the world, whether you call yourself Christian, um, Hindu, Muslim, Jew, Buddhist, whatever. You know what I mean? Whatever those people that are settled enough in their experience to know and recognize God. I'm a Christian, so I have to stand on that platform first where I speak. So it's just oh, hey baby, this is gonna be a long one, so you might want to just get off. But anyway, um, where do we begin, man? Where do I begin? I've heard so much commentary about who's right and who's wrong, even from black people. So let's talk black on black. Black people are talking about what should be done, what shouldn't have happened, who's right and who's wrong. Other black people are, downing and coming against the black people who are just really emotional in this moment. And again, who's right and who's wrong? I've never heard of her before until a couple of weeks ago, the Candace Owens. So I heard her talk about Ahmaud Arbery first. And first I was kind of going with her, and then the conversation took a spin, and I was like, whoa, as a black man in America, I'm like, wait a minute, that's a little absurd, So then, as the conversation went on, I was listening. I was like, oh yeah, I got to turn this off. So I turned it off, and then then we get in the heat of the thing. So then I started hearing more and more people talk about Candace Owens, who are from the perspective of the black community that has been abused. You know what I mean? And just saying this girl she's out of her mind. You know what I mean? So then I just heard this commentary now. She was being interviewed by another black man, black podcast show, and I was like, wow, okay. So I'm listening to her, and I'll say this first: I have come from a background where, from my spiritual upbringing, I saw the world through a lens that was biased, even in its spiritual. As much as we like to be called children of God, and we think that we are operating in wisdom, when it comes down to the things of the Bible, man, it's a lot missing. It's a lot of gray areas inside of all of that. So I came from that background, and then as I got older, I got to. It was funny. I remember an experience of mine. I was actually, I was talking to a Muslim or a Nation of Islam brother, and actually, you know what? It wasn't. It wasn't a. Well, yeah, it was. It was. I'm thinking of two different conversations. So we had this dialogue. We had this kind of a debate going on, and you know, I said what I said. He said what he said, and we were like, and in the end of the conversation, I felt like, you know, who won? You know, who won in this? You know, because at that time it's about, you know, winning. Who could bring up the best point to make themselves feel valuable in the moment or in the conversation. So I remember walking away from the conversation with this brother, and I was like man, I'm like, I don't know who won here, and I remember feeling like, well, God, I know I'm talking about the things of God, you know, of the mind of God that I thought represented the mind of God, you know. And I remember distinctly 2 days later after that conversation, I had asked God what was going on. And I remember God speaking to me and saying, you entered the conversation backwards. So, and how it came was, I had a dream, and I dreamed that I was walking into this apartment, but I was walking in backwards. So I opened the door, and I started walking in backwards, and I started bumping into furniture and bumping into things because I couldn't see in front of me because I was walking in backwards. So after the dream, I said, wow, I said, this is interesting. So what are you telling me, God? What are you saying? I'm walking into this situation backwards. So basically, and this was years ago. So when I had that dream, when God was telling me about that conversation, and he said, you walking in the room backwards, I was like, okay, I entered this conversation from the wrong heart or from the wrong frame of mind. Now at that time, I'm hearing God give me the revelation of this dream that he's given me. I'm hearing this revelation, and I'm saying, okay, I probably should have done it in more love, or I probably should have done it a different way. But I still didn't realize that the conversation that I entered into, the way that I did from the mind frame that I had, it still didn't have all of God. So it wasn't even about what I could have said or how I entered the room. I could have entered it differently. It was about, no, you really don't have enough information or facts or truth or understanding about this whole concept enough to speak on it. So I'm like, oh, you know, and I didn't get that until recently, you know, just kind of looking back on the conversation and just seeing how my life has moved in the way that it's moved, and the understandings that God has given me throughout the years after that point. I was like, okay, so what's going on? So I bring that up because I think it's a good point about the conversations that we were having as black people with black people about these things. So the Candace Owenses of the black community, and the let's use, come on now, I know what is his name, Roland Martin, and the Roland Martins of the black community. I gotta get this, my light is going weird here. Anyway, so you have these two sides, and remember, I'm talking to spiritual people, I'm talking to Christian people, I'm talking to spiritual people. So people that are not, you may not be able to hear this, but those who have ears, as God says, then let them hear. We're not going to be able to reach everybody with our particular conversation because we're not supposed to. But anyway, so I brought that story up because I was thinking the other day, and I said, wow, I said, why is racism why is it so stretched out? Meaning, why does it last so long? And you don't really see God doing what you think God would do to eradicate it. Why is this? So I was thinking about that the last week, and then I felt like God was like, well, I felt God kind of steer me to a kind of an idea, and it's because really the concept of racism is less about the visible injustices that people do to one another. It's less about that, and it's more about the conditioning and the programming that we have as black people, as white people, in our different moments, in our different experiences. So you have white people who have been raised to be racist unconsciously. So the mother and the father, the grandfather, and all of these things that they raise their children in a way to view black people in this degrading way, but not knowing that it's degrading. It's almost like you see you see animals and you appreciate the animals, but you've been taught to experience the animals or know the animals as lesser than what you are because they're animals. So that's kind of a harsh thing to say when you're talking about people, but nonetheless, it's still the same principle. So white people have been taught, conditioned to believe that black people are what the people that they value said they were. How many people do you know that you value and they've told you things, and just because it came out of their mouth, you really took it to heart, you believed it until you found something else out, until God revealed something else out. So it's the same thing. Black people, we've had this experience in America where we've been treated lesser than, and we've stacked generation upon generation on these ideas and these truths. So, it's hard to break free from these kind of oppressions on both sides when we were taught to believe them by the people that we value. So when we get into race, God is like, this is where it gets into a gray area. Judgment can't be passed immediately. Judgment can't be passed immediately because the people don't really realize, and I'm not speaking of all people, because we know there are people that are inherently moving in this racism spirit, and they know it, and they don't want to let it go. I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about the people who have believed a thing because they were conditioned and raised to believe it. The great thing about God, well, first off, God doesn't force you to do anything, and I think we understand that. So even to the heart and the mind of the person who's operating in this bigotry, in this racism, that don't know it, God can't force them to know it. He can just only nudge them into the directions that lead them to open up to receive a broader perspective against how they were raised. So this is why it's been such a long thing. And I mean, you're talking about racism even against people of all nationalities in different ways across history. So it's been the way it is because people have to be introduced to the voice of God. They have to see it and then allow the seed of that introduction to produce in them an awakening that moves them to do something else. That's why this generation, our kids and the kids to come, it's so important that we encourage them in their own hearts to see the truth, because I used to hate that statement, the children are our future. Yes, that's true, but I'm like, everybody has to take their part in co-creating their life, their experience with God, which unfolds into in the actual earth too. So, but now you really see why it's important that our kids really start to move in the understanding and the spirit that God has given them uniquely. So a lot of these things and these systems can be torn down, I'll say practically. But, it's just this whole thing that you have these different perspectives that both hold truth. But where do you find the beauty in the truth? And I think you find the beauty in both truths when you understand and you realize that these people are, and I'm talking about those people who are legitimately believing what they believe, because I do understand that there are people who say what they say because people are either forcing them to say it, or they are getting paid to say it. So these people are out of the loop. You don't even belong here, so go on. But for those who literally hold these beliefs and these views, the reason why things haven't changed as fast as they could, or as fast as we would like them to, or whatever, is because the idea of injustice by racism, which is a group of people feeling that they are superior than another group, is because these are the traditions of men. These are the things that are passed down. So we have to, and God will not force anybody to do anything. So we have the only thing that there is to allow the Spirit of God, who is in all, to awaken the understanding or the idea in you, so you can sow it into the earth, so that it will produce a harvest or a crop likened to that seed. So for the people who were steeped in racism, who were steeped in a culture of barbarity, they had to come out of that, through a progress. So I think we're at a point now where we've been here, the progression of awakening from this racist type of thinking. We've been here too long, so now things have to start to shake. Tornadoes start to have to happen. Earthquakes start to have to happen to show up in order for people to shake themselves, to be galvanized out of this system of thinking. And it's by fear and it's by destruction. So it doesn't have to be, but when we are in a thing for too long, then it is. So, man, I think I feel fulfilled right now. I think I'm finished. I hope this is making sense. If you are having a problem understanding anything that I'm saying, I invite you into a conversation, because the best thing that we can do for one another is get understanding. And the only way that we get understanding is if we courageously ask, what are you talking about? You said this, I don't understand this. Can you help me? Can you enlighten me on how I can just remotely be clear about what you're saying? That's how change happens. So let's be courageous enough to ask the questions. If you don't understand anything that I've just said, be courageous enough to ask the question, and let's have a discussion. Let's dialogue about it. And if you don't feel it, ask God. Well, you know what? That's the first thing you should do. You should always ask God, how should I feel about this conversation? What is it that I have to know? Or what is it that this person is saying that, in their mind is very true, that I could get or I could benefit from? You do that first. And then if God says, hey, ask him a question, then do it. Be courageous. Be courageous. Be courageous. The Bible talks about cowards. All cowards, and this other word said, will have their place in the lake of fire. It's not about hell as we know hell and the lake of fire. It's about, there are things that God has given you to say, seeds that you are to plant or you are to initiate, that if you do not do them, if you're not courageous enough to speak, then we won't get to the bottom line. That's all I'm saying. Woo! Let Me Talk Radio, man. Pastor Jamal, Rising Ground Church. That's it. Y'all have a wonderful rest of your evening. I'll talk to you. Peace.